IMDB, similar to Letterboxd, similar to Rotten Tomatoes, people in the film community tend to love or hate it. Below me, I have every single film that is in the top 25 of all time rated by users on IMDb, and I'm going to rank them in a tier list today. Bear in mind, all of these 25 films are in there for a reason. Most of them, if not all of them, I think are pretty good, but some a lot better than others, and with that being said, let's get into the first one. Up first, we actually have Seven, and this is an interesting one for me. I think Seven is a very, very good film. Do I think it is Fincher's best? No. But do I think it's a good noir crime flick that offers thrilling moments, specifically in that final act? Do I also think it runs in the realms of predictability at times? Yes. But the sort of drowsy city atmosphere does sort of carry it throughout the film, and it has these dark elements which I really tend to enjoy. That being said, I don't love it. I think Seven is very, very good, but for me, in a tier of just fantastic films, it will probably have to go in the low end of B tier / the high end of C tier. I'm going to stick it in B tier for now because I do think it's very good. It's just nothing revolutionary, in my opinion, within this crime genre. Okay, we have City of God next. If you haven't seen City of God, it's probably one of the best coming-of-age stories I've ever seen about a boy trying to fulfill his dreams, trying to get where he wants to be, and trying to escape the life he is living in poverty. A Brazilian film that focuses on so many different storylines in one, and yet somehow manages to not become convoluted and bloated, which is a massive, massive success. It's thrilling, it's devastating, it has an abundance of political commentary, and it's a fantastic watch from start to finish. I am actually going to put City of God in the A tier for now. I truly believe it to be in this higher end. Okay, we have Empire Strikes Back now. Empire Strikes Back for me is easily the best Star Wars film. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. You know, I'm not one who grew up with Star Wars massively, even though I watched it as a kid. I was definitely more into other franchises and other stuff. But The Empire Strikes Back is a perfect conclusion to the original trilogy. We get the hard-hitting moments, we get a fantastic ending, we get the thrills, we get the brilliant world building that the Star Wars films always had to offer, but with this being that much more in terms of character development and in terms of understanding the stakes at hand and the motivations for the characters as well. And I truly believe it to be a sci-fi, fantasy epic, whichever genre you think it fits into, and it definitely deserves its place being in the A tier as far as I'm concerned. Fight Club. Okay, Fight Club is a really interesting one for me. I think Fight Club is a very good film. Similar to what I said about Seven, I don't think it's anywhere near Fincher's best. I think it has some really interesting commentary on toxic masculinity, on identity, and I think a lot of it is well done, but a lot of the commentary tends to lose its run and lose its consistency, and it kind of floats in the middle of the film without a goal at hand, in my opinion. That being said, it is exciting, it is thrilling, it does have a similar sort of atmosphere to Seven, which makes it a joy to watch. There are moments which I love, and I do really like the film, all things considered. Again, similar to Seven, I do think it runs into the realms of predictability at certain points, but that being said, it's still very, very good. I'm going to have to put Fight Club in the C tier. I don't think it's quite, the D tier, and I definitely want to have it in the B tier, because I do think Seven, I would have slightly higher in terms of Fincher's, thrillers. But Fight Club is still very, very good, as all of the films on this list are really, apart from maybe the odd one or two. But Fight Club is going to go in C tier for me. Okay, so next we have 12 Angry Men. 12 Angry Men is arguably one of the greatest plays ever written. A film with themes still stand up today. A film just as relevant today as ever, really. It's exciting, it's thrilling. I remember the first time I watched it when I was a kid, or many years ago, and just kind of wondering how a film about 12 men in a courthouse could be entertaining, and boy was I proved wrong. It's really exciting. I think it's Sidney Lumet's best script by far, at least out of the ones I've seen. He's done many, many great films. I think each acting performance has, evokes emotions. We get the different aspects of the depravities of humanity and also the positives of humanity through each character. I think it's exciting, I think it's upsetting, and I think it stands the test of time and is so important in regards to one of the greatest screenplays ever written. I'm actually going to put 12 Angry Men in the A tier selection. Goodfellas. Okay, Goodfellas is one that I love very, very much. A film that showcases a man going from nothing to try and make his way up the marble ladder. A piece of storytelling that is just so bold, so ambitious, and has a really different feel than other mob films, which I think around the 80s and 90s, Scorsese sort of mastered that over his companions who were making similar films. And Goodfellas just had that different feel. I think technically it's so proficient with its editing, with its style. It's so stylish, it's so smooth, but it's also so character driven. And watching, again, similar to 12 Angry Men, the the depravity of humanity, the characteristics of greed, of anger, of abuse, and I think it really, really showcases that in such a profound way through the eyes of Henry Hill. And I think Goodfellas for me is actually Martin Scorsese's best ever work, and I have seen all his feature films now. That being said, I don't think it's crazy higher than Silence, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, After Hours, but I do think for me it is his number one work. So that being said, if you're a number one Scorsese film, you're gonna have to pop into the S tier selection. Okay, we have a fan favourite now, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is an interesting one. Looking past the political bias it clearly has, and looking past the edges of political and military propaganda, which again it obviously has, which I think many films have, and I don't think it really deters my viewing experience most of the time. But Forrest Gump does slightly at points. I think it very much has a fit with the system kind of deal, but at the same time, there are moments of heartfelt moments. There are sequences which I really, really like. Specifically in the first act, I do think it really loses itself after that and becomes a little bit of a bore for me. I think my main gripe with it a lot of the time is the fact that I just don't find it that entertaining. I think it's cliche. I think it has a certain lukewarm style. I'm just not really... I don't really enjoy when it comes to watching the film, and even though I think it provides those emotional narrative beats at points, I think it really loses itself within that second and third act, and it just becomes a little bit of a bore. Unfortunately, I know it's a fan favourite for some, I'm going to have to put Forrest Gump in the D tier. It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, arguably one of the greatest Christmas films ever, probably the greatest in my eyes. A film about life, a film about striving towards, a film about mental illness, a film about emotion, a film about family dynamics, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful watch. Again, similar to 12 Angry Men, a film that stands the test of its time. It's seasonal, it's one that many people have, traditions of watching every single year, myself included. And I think Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life is again similar to 12 Angry Men, one of the better pieces of cinema during the old school Hollywood era. I think it's one of the best to come out of that time. That being said, do I think it's above Empire Strikes Back and City of God? I'm going to say no. But I don't think it can go in deep B tier for me. I think it'd have to be in the A tier, probably the lower end of A tier, but A tier. We'll go low A tier. Okay, now we have Inception, Nolan's Inception. I think Inception is a visual spectacle similar to many, if not all, Nolan's films. I think he managed to create set pieces that are so exciting and thrilling. And I think even though I do believe it to be bloated with exposition and an overuse of it, which is a common criticism from Nolan that I don't always agree with, but when it comes to Inception, I do. I don't think... I just didn't feel any empathetic notion towards any of the characters. But that being said, it provides such a brilliant watch through its set pieces, inspiring visuals, a fantastic soundtrack, and of course the main lead role. Even though I don't care for the relationships on show, I still really enjoy my time with it. I don't think it would be in that B spot. I think it's going to be the highest end of C tier for me. We have Interstellar. Interstellar is one that often gets bogged down in the same vein as Inception, as being a film that can't really handle the amount of exposition it throws at you. Whilst I don't believe everything's perfect. I'm not a huge fan of the actual ending of Interstellar. I think Interstellar is actually a lot more than just a visual epic. I think it really throws themes of fatherhood, of family dynamics, of memories and perceiving them, and also life and holding on to it whilst you have it. I think Matthew McConaughey is fantastic. I think the cast is really, really great. And of course, that being said, it is, of course, a technical marvel. There are sequences in this which are truly jaw-dropping. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was so impressed. And I really think that Interstellar is one of, if not Nolan's best film. I truly believe that. And it will have to go in the highest end of the B tier section for me. Okay, so we have one of the most classic 90s films to date, the Pulp Fiction, I believe to be Quentin Tarantino's strongest ever screenplay, a brilliant and comedic script that blends the elements of comedy and homages to traditional Hollywood and action sequences and crime dramas. It's such a genius script that really, really, again, similar to many in this list, stands the test of time with the themes it tries to throw at you. And I think it's more than that, it's just such an entertaining watch, going on a ride with these different memorable characters and understanding and helping to construct these stories. I think Pulp Fiction is very, very, very good. Would I put it in A tier? Probably not. I'm not as huge on Tarantino as most people, even though I think he's a great writer. I'm going to put Pulp Fiction in the highest end of B tier, just ahead of Interstellar. Okay, we have Schindler's List next, and if you've heard me speak about Schindler's List before, you'll know that I truly believe Schindler's List to be Steven Spielberg's masterpiece. I think it's his best ever film by a good margin, and I think it's such an important story that needed to be told, but done in a sincere approach that needed to happen, and really held to the authenticity and one that had so much research behind it. It's so devastating, easily one of the most devastating films I've ever seen, and Steven Spielberg managed to really do it in such an empathetic way, such a heartfelt way, and his best and easily most important work. As the film goes, I'm probably not as high on it as 12 Angry Men or Goodfellas, but I would probably put it in the high end of A tier. I think it's incredible. I really, really do. Okay, now we have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is definitely one of the films that got me into film at a young age, and I'm sure many of you as well. I remember my mum passing me on DVD when I was, younger and watching it and just being completely in awe. Not only does it have one of my favorite actors of all time, being Jack Nicholson, giving one of his best, if not in my opinion, his best ever performance, but it's so important in the way of throwing stuff about society, about how we treat people, about the effects of long-term institutionalization for people who perhaps don't need it, and how we can empathize with people in a different way. I think it has one of the strongest antagonist roles ever. With the reason I think she is so great as a character is because, in a way, she is, she's a character of realism, but she's a character of realistic things, of someone you'd meet in a day-to-day life, not a Voldemort or a Darth Vader, someone with genuinely just horrible characteristics, but mundane ones as well. And I think it really, really strikes me as being such a powerful film throughout. Kind of ending, which is so kind of hard to watch, but also drowning optimism for the rest of the characters as well. I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is one of the best films on this list for me, if not the best so far. So it is going the highest end of S tier. Okay, we have Nolan's The Dark Knight next. Dark Knight's an interesting one. It used to be one of my favourite films a while back. I've rewatched it recently. Whilst I think it did, it transcended the superhero genre. It had the ability to blend the perfect amount of harmony and playfulness with serious narratives and emotional beats. Do I think everything holds up today? No. I think some of the action sequences are quite lackluster, and it struggles to maintain the consistent tone it had in the first two acts in the third. But that being said, it's still a joy to watch. There are some phenomenal set pieces. Of course, Heath Ledger being a massive, massive part of the enjoyment for this film and the contributing factor. And I think this really pulled the Batman films out of the dirt after the 90s Batman films, which I don't think are all that bad, but let's be honest, they weren't particularly well received. I think The Dark Knight is very, very good. I'm going to put it in the highest end of B tier for now. I think it'll go, I think just below Interstellar. I'm actually probably a bit higher than Interstellar than I am on Dark Knight now. So Saving Private Ryan, again, a great film, one that, has had many, many negatives attached to it because of its use of, military propaganda, which we can argue for days. And I think Saving Private Ryan is a great watch. It's devastating, it's harrowing, it doesn't hold back, it doesn't pull any punches when showcasing the visceral, horrible imagery of war. And I think it's, again, an important story to be told. I think it's possibly one of Spielberg's best, maybe in his sort of top 5, top 3, maybe, probably top 5. Do I think it's as good as some of the films in the B tier? No. But I think it's very, very high up there. I'm going to put it, I think it's better than these three. I'd put it just below Pulp Fiction, in my opinion. It's a great war film. It's a great, anti-war film. It shows the effects of war and the long-term effects of that, and the relationships between the soldiers as well. But I don't think it really revolutionizes the war genre, such as many other films do, similar to a Paths of Glory from his time, or an Apocalypse Now, or even, with Schindler's List, if we're considering that in the factor. But it's still a very, very, very good watch. Okay, The Godfather Part II. The Godfather Part II, I think, is great. Do I think The Godfather Part II is as good as Godfather Part One? No, I actually don't. It's a fantastic film. It's a brilliant story on the mob that had relentless research on the downplays of it. The life in a mob, the association with greed, the association of family, of the dynamic, of respect, of loyalty, of morale. But at the same time, I just find the first Godfather to be that much more enjoyable, to be honest, and that much more entertaining. Godfather Part 2 is still amazing. I don't want you to, get this wrong. I am going to put it in the A tier, so it's still, the top end. It's still a great film. But I am going to, and you'll know it's on here, I am going to stick the first Godfather a little bit higher, but I think it'll fit in between Empire Strikes Back and City of God for me, for now. Okay, Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, the blueprint for every real action blockbuster now. A film that just plays to its strengths so well. Some of the most thrilling action scenes I've ever seen is virtually like watching historic documentary due to the authenticity and the research that Akira Kurosawa managed to put in towards those times to really make sure that it's drowning in authenticity. It feels like you're really there. It feels like you're observing that time period, which is so amazing. And for a 3.5 hour film, this goes so quickly. It's just vastly entertaining from start to finish. It has comedic elements which are enjoyable. It really emphasizes the the importance of the samurai code and kind of the way we work. And I think that it really is the perfect action blockbuster and a blockbuster on an unfathomable scale that is going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to replicate in the future. This definitely goes in the S tier for me, and I think I'm going to just put it just below One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge Western guy. I'm not. I've not. Westerns I would consider, everyone has a blind spot in cinema. Westerns I would consider to be mine. But it is so good. It's a really, really good story. I think it plays for its strengths. It's got some exciting sequences. It's iconic. I think Sergio Leone's direction, Clint Eastwood's performance, the cinematography on show, the score, of course, everyone knows about, and it really, really is an iconic film. I haven't seen it in a good couple of years, actually. I do want to rewatch or watch the whole trilogy again, but I think The Good, Bad, and the Ugly is a great film. I'm not as high on it on others, but I probably would put it around here, around the higher end of B tier, just below Pulp Fiction. And unfortunately for you Seven fans, I am actually going to drop down 7 to the C tier. Okay, so The Matrix, undoubtedly one of the most influential science fiction pieces ever, a film that really revolutionized the genre in the late 90s and gave it really the kick it needed to when showcasing what can be done. I'm not someone who's huge on The Matrix. I appreciate everything it's done for the sci-fi genre, and I think it really plays towards its strength, and its direction is so brilliant, and it's profound with its themes as well, which makes it that much better. I think it's a quintessential science fiction project in the 90s, but where would I put it? I'd probably put The Matrix in the C tier, honestly. I'm not as huge on The Matrix as most people, but it would be in the highest end, so right at the top of the C tier. Okay, so the Shawshank Redemption is an interesting one. Shawshank Redemption is number one on IMDb. It's lauded as being one of the greatest films of all time. Do I necessarily agree? No, but that's just kind of how I would process things. I think Shawshank Redemption is very, very good. Upon rewatch, a few months ago, it still stands up as being fantastic. It's still a great film. I think everyone knows, I don't need to speak about it too much, just like any of these films, everyone knows how good Shawshank is. But the question is, where do I think it stacks up against the other films on this list? I don't know. I'm going to put it, Shawshank Redemption, down. I'm going to put it in low A tier. I think around there. I think it's great. I think it's better than every film in B for me, but I don't think it quite reaches the level of any of these 5. I'm gonna put it in low A tier, but it's still very, very high, and it's still a great film, and I still think it's a phenomenal achievement that deserves most of the praise it gets. Silence of the Lambs, a quintessential crime flick from the 90s. Visceral, horrible imagery. It's scary, it's haunting, it's paranoia and anxiety-inducing. Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster just being a miraculous pair who both deliver arguably probably two of my favorite performances ever. I've watched multiple times. A film that I grew up watching, maybe too young, I would argue. But Silence of the Lambs, I'm going to put in the highest. I'm going to put it in A tier. It's going to be in between Godfather Part 2 and City of God for me. I think it's that good, and I think it really, really is one of the greatest crime films ever made, or at least, that I've seen anyway. Okay, so we now have The Godfather. Again, I think it's exactly the same as I said for Godfather Part 2. It's a thrilling look at the mob life. I think it's exciting. I think The Godfather is slightly better than Godfather Part 2, and I actually might put it... I'm going to put Godfather Part 2 in the... I'm going to put Godfather Part 2 just ahead of 12 Angry Men. I think it deserves to be there. Or Godfather Part 1. And it's actually just going to be just above Godfather Part 2 as well. I do think Godfather 1 is slightly better. And of course, and I am going to bump all 3 in one, because I do actually like to treat them as one film as much as they're not. I think Lord of the Rings films are just everything to me. They got me through some really hard times in my life. They are my favourite films ever, and they probably always will be at this stage. And I think that they really offered something that not many could achieve, and I don't think any director other than Peter Jackson could have achieved what he did with adapting such a brilliant selection of books into a remarkable trilogy, and for me, the best trilogy ever created. It's a fancy project on a huge epic scale with just something that hits every emotional narrative beat, never fails to make me cry. It's exciting. It really represents the characters sincerely and well, just as they were written, even though the Tolkien family don't particularly like the films. I think they are a perfect trilogy, and I'm going to count them as all one because they're my favourite films ever. The Lord of the Rings films. The trilogy is going to go at the highest end of S tier for me. Now, as far as the drops go, I feel like I'm pretty happy with this. Unfortunately, Forrest Gump is right there at the bottom, so it stands out. I do think Forrest Gump is significantly worse than anything else on this list, unfortunately. But let me know what your list would be, and let me know what changes you would make to mine as well.